The last chocolate truffle rolled out of the box, tumbling across the Manhattan pavement and landing right at the edge of a pair of polished leather shoes. Emily Carter had no strength left to cry. The city's midday sun scorched her skin, her shirt soaked with sweat, and her hands trembled from exhaustion. She sat motionless in her worn-out wheelchair, surrounded by a sea of strangers who never bothered to look down. 4 months ago, a hit-and-run accident shattered her world. The car that struck her fled the scene, leaving her partially paralyzed and pregnant. Since that night, everything had unraveled. No family, no support. She moved into a crumbling apartment in Brooklyn and began hand-making chocolate truffles each night, clinging to one single hope, the baby growing inside her. Today, like so many before, she wheeled herself over 10 blocks to sell outside Blake Tower, one of Manhattan's most prominent office buildings. But security pushed her away, and her weak arms couldn't lift the chair over the curb. The box tipped, truffles spilling onto the sidewalk. She reached forward on instinct, but the sudden motion caused her balance to slip. She nearly fell. That's when he appeared. A man walked up, silent and assured. He knelt without a word and picked up the fallen truffle, treating it as if it were priceless. Their eyes met. His were blue, sharp, but something within them touched the aching solitude in her. "How much for all of them?" he asked, deep voice, steady and serious. Emily blinked. She hadn't expected anyone to speak to her. Not like this. "I'm serious," he added before she could even respond. "There are $55 each," she answered automatically, almost disbelieving the moment. He pulled out his wallet, took out a wad of bills and handed it to her without counting. "I'll take them all. My office could use something sweet today." Before she could process it, he handed the box to a nearby security guard and said, "Take this to my floor." Then he turned back to her. "Where are you planning to sell the rest today?" Emily hesitated. I'm not sure yet. There's a cafe 2 blocks from here called Clara's Haven. The owner is a friend. Tell her Nathaniel Blake sent you. She'll help." Before she could utter a thank you, his hand gently touched hers. Just a fleeting contact, but enough to send something humming through her chest. "And don't think this is charity," he added with a faint smile. "Your truffles are truly special." As he disappeared behind the glass doors of the high-rise, Emily remained there, hand on her belly, heart pounding. For the first time in a very long time, something in her began to shift. That night, alone in her small apartment, Emily Carter replayed the day 1,000 times in her mind. The fear, the humiliation, the near fall, and then him. The man who had bought all her sweets and somehow given her back a piece of dignity she thought she had lost. The baby in her womb stirred, as if agreeing with her thoughts. Emily smiled, gently caressing her belly. "Tomorrow will be better," she whispered to her unborn child. "Mommy will keep trying for you." While preparing a fresh batch of brigadeiros in the tiny kitchen, she couldn't stop thinking about those blue eyes, that gentle smile, that voice that had wrapped around her like an invisible embrace. What she didn't know was that Nathaniel had once met her at a community fundraiser months ago, before the accident. Her radiant smile and warm spirit had stayed with him. Now, in his office, he flipped through the same file he had quietly kept since that day, containing her photograph, taken before the world changed. "I finally found you," he murmured, his gaze filled with emotions too complex to name. "And this time, I won't let you disappear again." It was only 6 a.m., and Emily Carter was already fixing her hair in the bathroom. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to tie it neater than the day before. The cheap coat, the pale pink apron, and the determined look in her eyes were all reflected clearly in the mirror. "Today, Mommy will do better," she whispered to the baby growing inside her. She hadn't been able to stop thinking about Nathaniel Blake all night. Those blue eyes had haunted even her dreams. The cafe Nathaniel had mentioned was her first destination of the day. Emily never imagined she'd find herself in a place like this. Clara's Haven was tucked into a quiet corner of Soho, nestled between old bookstores and quirky art studios. The scent of fresh espresso mingled with warm pastries wafted through the air, wrapping around her like a gentle welcome. She hesitated slightly as her wheelchair bumped against the edge of the curb. Then the door opened, and a vibrant voice rang out. "You must be Emily, right? Nathaniel called me last night." A woman in her 50s, her silver hair pinned neatly, her eyes sparkling with sharp kindness, stepped forward to hold the door. "I'm Clara, and I've got a special spot ready for you." Emily was stunned. Everything was moving too fast. This morning she had been pushed away, humiliated, and now she was being welcomed like a guest of honor. Inside was another world entirely: exposed brick walls, soft golden lighting, quiet conversations flowing like warm tea. Clara led her to a low table, custom fit for a wheelchair. On it sat a delicate sign, "Delights by Emily, handmade with love." "But I can't afford this kind of space," Emily began. "No one said you had to pay," Clara said gently. "We split profits, 50-50, equal partners." Before Emily could respond, the doorbell chimed. A familiar figure stepped in. Gray coat, black tie, steady stride. Nathaniel. Her heart clenched. "Good morning," he said, his eyes landing on the tray of truffles displayed with quiet elegance. "Looks amazing." Clara arched an eyebrow. "Nathaniel Blake, you're late." He chuckled softly. "I had a good reason." Emily suddenly found herself flustered. She fiddled with the tablecloth, trying to hide the smudge of chocolate on her fingers. "You stayed up all night making these, didn't you?" Nathaniel asked, not looking at her hands, but somehow knowing anyway. She blushed. "How did you know?" "Just a guess," he shrugged, though the glimmer in his eyes told a different story. When Clara stepped away to prepare coffee, the space between them seemed to shift. Across the tray of sweets sat something else, quiet, unspoken, yet undeniable. "Do you come here every day?" Emily asked softly. "If it helps you feel a little less alone," he replied, "then yes." She had no words. For the first time in months, she didn't feel pitied. She wasn't seen as someone broken or tragic. She was simply a person, seen as a person. And that, for Emily, was everything. Emily was beginning to settle into her mornings at Clara's Haven. Every day she arrived early, arranging each chocolate truffle on a silver tray, adjusting the tiny handwritten sign, "Delights by Emily." She was learning to flow with the rhythm of the place, the drip of coffee, the clink of spoons, the soft jazz floating through the air like a warm breeze. And then, like clockwork, Nathaniel arrived. He showed up every day at 9:15 sharp, always in a suit, sometimes formal, sometimes more relaxed, always carrying that signature scent, something between mint, cedarwood, and something unmistakably him. He never missed a morning without asking, "What's new today?" Each day, Emily had a new flavor: sea salt caramel, passion fruit cognac, and Nathaniel was always the first to taste. But he never critiqued like a gourmet. Instead, it felt as though he was listening to her through sweetness. "Which flavor's your favorite?" she asked once. "Whichever has the most heart," he replied. Then silence, then a soft smile. They had never gone on a date, never held hands, but every time he sat beside her, close enough to hear her breathe, far enough not to intrude, the world felt a little more bearable. One day, heavy rain blanketed the city. Emily arrived late, her coat soaked through, her box of truffles slightly off kilter. Nathaniel was already there, holding a second cup of coffee. "I thought you weren't coming," he said, not accusing, just quietly concerned. "I had to," she said. "Otherwise, I'd feel like I was slipping away from myself." He said nothing, just pushed the cup toward her. "For you." She couldn't remember the last time someone had something waiting for her. Then came the morning he didn't show up. 9:15 passed, then 9:30, 10 o'clock. She tried not to notice, tried to smile at customers, but every sound around her faded into background noise. She realized Nathaniel wasn't just the man who bought her truffles. He was the quiet pillar she had unknowingly leaned on. He came back the next day. His suit was slightly wrinkled, his eyes shadowed. "Sorry," he said softly. "Yesterday, I was at the hospital. Something old. Came back. Emily didn't ask. Instead, she placed a dark chocolate truffle in front of him, a flavor she'd never made before. "For me?" he asked. "For someone who knows stepping back can be a kind of strength," she replied. He looked at her for a long moment, as if wanting to say something, but didn't. Something was growing between them, unnamed, undefined, but real. Just being there, in each other's orbit, was enough to ease the weight of the day. That morning, New York lay quiet beneath the cold rain. Claris Haven was quieter than usual. The gray light spilling through the window painted Emily's face with a soft melancholy. She was adjusting her tray of truffles when Nathaniel walked in. Rain-speckled coat, slightly tousled hair, but the same unwavering gaze. "Have you had breakfast?" he asked. She shook her head. "I'm not hungry." He said nothing more, simply ordered 2 plates of buttered toast and ginger tea. They sat across from each other in the silent cafe, in a space where neither touched, but the air between them felt heavy, like something unspoken pressing in from all sides. Nathaniel set his tea down, turning the cup slowly in his hands before finally speaking. "Emily, there's something I need to tell you." She looked up. He wasn't looking at her. His eyes were on the window, on the rain that crossed like old memories. "That night, the night of the accident, I was there." Emily froze. "The car. I was right behind it. I saw it hit you. I saw you thrown to the ground. I was the one who called the ambulance." The world seemed to stop. In her mind, the hazy flashes of that night rushed back. Headlights, screeching tires, a deep voice begging her to stay awake. "It was you," she whispered. He nodded. "I held your hand the whole time while we waited, but when I got to the hospital, you were gone." "Because I didn't want to be found," she said softly, hands tightening in her lap. "I thought my life was over." No, it was just beginning. Nathaniel looked up, and for the first time his gaze met hers, full, steady, and unflinching. "I searched for you. For more than 2 months. I couldn't stop thinking about you, about how you still managed to smile, even when you couldn't move." Emily didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to cry. Another part wanted to run from the weight of it all. "So, all those times you came here, was it because—" "At first, to make sure you were okay," he admitted, voice low. "But it stopped being just that." "You pity me?" "No." Nathaniel's answer was immediate, sharp enough to make her flinch. "I admire you. I owe you the truth. But I also owe myself a chance to be near you." She gave a bitter smile. "I'm a pregnant woman in a wheelchair selling candy on the sidewalk. You're the CEO of a finance empire. Nathaniel, this isn't real." "No," he said, quiet but firm. "It's not real. It's true, and I can't pretend anymore." A silence fell, heavy like the raindrops outside. Emily stared at him for a long moment. Then, instead of rejecting or accepting, she reached for the truffle box and gently placed a new one before him. "Dark chocolate, candied orange peel," she said, the flavor of things we're not ready to name. He picked it up, his eyes never leaving hers. Just then the baby kicked hard, and Emily Carter instinctively placed her hand over her belly. Nathaniel didn't miss the movement. He watched her, his gaze deep, almost moved. "How far along are you?" he asked, his voice low and slightly hoarse. 6 months, she answered automatically, then frowned, wondering why she had just shared something so personal with a stranger. But he didn't feel like a stranger. There was something familiar about him, something both comforting and distant. That left her unsettled. "The baby's father?" he began to ask, but she cut him off coldly. "He's no longer part of my life." Nathaniel nodded, as if he had already expected the answer. A flicker of something sharp passed through his eyes. "He's a fool," he said simply, then turned back to his coffee. The words made Emily's eyes sting. "You don't know anything," she murmured, almost to herself. "I know more than you think," he replied, still looking at her, his gaze so intense it sent a chill down her spine. Before she could say another word, a noisy group entered the cafe. They looked at her with curious stares, whispering unkind things under their breath. And then Nathaniel did something completely unexpected. He stood up, walked around to the back of her wheelchair, and gently pushed her toward a private table in the corner. After Nathaniel left, Mrs. Evelyn approached, carrying a cup of tea. "He told you, didn't he?" she asked gently. "About the accident?" "He's been looking for you for 2 months," she said softly. "I've never seen a man so determined. And when you showed up here selling sweets outside the cafe, he was already there, waiting. That wasn't a coincidence." "Why?" Emily whispered. "Why would he care so much about me?" "Sometimes," Mrs. Evelyn smiled kindly, "destiny has a strange way of bringing together those who are meant to belong to each other. And when you meet someone who stirs something deep in your heart, logic doesn't stand a chance." That night, alone in her apartment, Emily opened the envelope Nathaniel had left behind. Inside was a scheduled doctor's appointment and a small card with a handwritten note. "Because you deserve every chance in this world. And because there's something I need to tell you. Something I've kept hidden since that fateful rainy night. NB." The baby in her belly kicked gently, as if in agreement. And for the first time in many months, Emily allowed herself to dream of a different future. A future where love, second chances, and a real family might actually exist. Days passed. Nathaniel didn't call. Emily sat in the cafe, eyes fixed on the rain streaking down the window, her heart as heavy as the gray sky above. She touched the phone in her pocket, countless unread messages. "You haven't called him back?" Mrs. Evelyn asked, clearly sensing something was wrong. "He called." "Many times," she nodded, her eyes kind. "It seems he's tormented too." The rain grew heavier, but Emily decided to leave. "Wait until the rain eases," Mrs. Evelyn urged. "You can't safely maneuver the wheelchair down a slippery slope." But Emily had made up her mind, and that's when everything started to fall apart. The newly installed ramp was slick with rain. The wheels slipped. Emily lost balance. She gasped, instinctively shielding her belly. But the fall never came. "I've got you," Nathaniel's voice whispered near her ear, his arm securely holding the wheelchair. "I will always catch you." She opened her eyes. Those deep blue eyes were still there. He was soaked, his expensive suit drenched in rain, but his gaze full of worry and love. "Let me take you home," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "Please." Nathaniel's car was spacious and luxurious, yet the air inside was tense. He drove carefully, his grip tight on the wheel. But he wasn't driving her back to her old apartment. He was taking her to the building where he lived. Emily didn't protest. Something had shifted in that near fall, a truth she could no longer deny. The apartment occupied the entire penthouse floor, with glass walls from floor to ceiling revealing the city, glowing under the rain. But Nathaniel's eyes were only on her. "You're trembling," he noticed, gently draping a soft blanket around her shoulders, his fingers brushing her with tender care. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked quietly. "Because I need to talk to you," he said, kneeling in front of her wheelchair, as he had done before, but this time it was different. There was no distance. "I've been trying to say this for 3 days. I can't wait any longer." "Nathaniel," she began, but he held her hand, eyes locked on hers. "The night of your accident, when I found you lying in the street, something in me changed. I held your hand, waited for the ambulance, and you smiled. In that pain, you smiled and said your baby was strong." Tears poured down Emily's cheeks. The memory rose from the depths, where she had buried it, beneath fear and darkness. "I searched for you for 2 months," Nathaniel continued. "And when I saw you sitting outside my building, selling candy, I knew fate was offering me a second chance. A chance to do what's right." "What's right?" she echoed, her voice trembling. "To protect you," he said, his hand rising to touch her cheek. "To take care of you, to To love me?" she whispered. And in that moment, it felt like the entire city stopped breathing. "Yes," he replied, his voice thick, his eyes glowing. "To love you, since that very night." "Nathaniel, this is insane," she said, shaking her head, trying to outrun the flood of emotions. "You don't even know me. I'm carrying someone else's child. I'm not perfect." "You are perfect," he cut in, without hesitation. "Perfect in your imperfection. Perfect in your strength. Perfect for me." Before she could protest, he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't just a kiss of love. It was healing. It was promise. It was a beginning, soft as silk, yet burning like fire. She was no longer just the woman in a wheelchair, not just a single mother abandoned. She was a woman who was loved, desired. When they pulled away, both were breathless. Outside, the storm howled. But inside that apartment, everything felt still. "I love you," Nathaniel whispered, his forehead resting against hers. "And I'll spend the rest of my life proving it, if you'll let me." "How can you be sure?" she asked, voice breaking. "You want all of this? The wheelchair, the baby, the complications?" "When I look at you, I don't see complications," he said. "I see the strongest woman I've ever known, the devoted mother. I see my future." The baby kicked again. They both laughed. "What about the baby's father?" she asked, hand resting protectively on her belly. "He may not be my blood," Nathaniel said gently, "but if you'll let me, I'll love him like my own. I'll be the father he deserves." Emily's tears fell freely now, not from sorrow, but from something far greater: hope. The world seemed to spin, in a whirl of colors and sensation. Nathaniel loved her with a reverence that felt almost sacred, as if she were something fragile and precious, as if he had waited his entire life just to touch her with such tenderness. That night, wrapped in quiet intimacy, Nathaniel held her close, not out of sympathy, but out of reverence. For the first time in years, Emily felt whole, not because of what she had lost, but because of what she had found. A connection that spoke without words, a warmth that healed without touch. The baby kicked at that exact moment, making them both laugh. "It seems like someone's hungry," Nathaniel joked, his hand gently gliding over her belly. "I'll get us a snack." She meant to protest, but he was already up, pulling on his sweatpants. Just as his hand touched the doorknob, she called out, "Nathaniel?" "Yeah?" "I love you." The simplicity of those words froze him in place. 3 steps. And he was back at her side, wrapping her in his arms, kissing her deeply. "Say it again," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I love you so much," she smiled, resting her face against his chest. The snacks would be forgotten for a few more hours. "What is it, sweetheart?" Nathaniel whispered, kissing a tear that had slipped down her cheek. "I didn't know it could feel like this," she sobbed softly. "I didn't know I could be loved like this." Nathaniel smiled, a smile meant only for her. "This is just the beginning, my love, only the beginning." Crystal chandeliers cast shimmering light across the polished marble floor. Guests in expensive evening gowns and tailored tuxedos filled the grand ballroom of Manhattan's finest hotel. This was the annual charity gala, hosted by the Blake Foundation, an event reserved for the city's elite. And for the first time, Emily Carter was there. She wore a deep navy velvet gown, custom Disneyfied to complement her wheelchair. Her hair was pinned up neatly, her makeup soft, but her eyes still carried a flicker of apprehension. The ballroom buzzed with music and laughter. But the moment Nathaniel Blake pushed Emily Carter's wheelchair into the grand hall, the room fell completely silent. Every eye turned toward them, the most powerful man in the city and a pregnant woman in a wheelchair. "Isn't she the candy seller?" someone whispered. "What a scandal," another murmured. Nathaniel ignored them all. He brought her to the center of the hall, where the orchestra had just begun to play a waltz. "They don't matter," he whispered in her ear. "Only you do." But the malice in the room still lingered like a cloud. Anna, the one who had always pursued him, appeared, dressed in red, lips crimson, her smile as venomous as a snake. Nathaniel, a wealthy older woman, stepped forward, raising an eyebrow. "I didn't expect you to bring company." "Emily is not company," he replied, voice cool as ice. "She is my fiancée." The woman's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the marble floor. "Fiancée?" she gasped. "But she's the woman I love," Nathaniel declared clearly. "And the mother of a child I already consider my own." Tears welled in Emily's eyes, but this time they were tears of pride. Nathaniel knelt before her, in front of the entire crowd. "This woman taught me what it means to love, and to be brave. She has walked through hell and come back stronger than ever. She carries life inside her, and I have loved that child as if it were my own blood. Because real love doesn't require shared DNA. And yes, I proposed to her. This child will be my child. And if anyone has a problem with that, the door is right there." Silence blanketed the room. Then, unexpectedly, Mrs. Evelyn began to clap. Then another, and another, until the entire ballroom erupted in applause. Nathaniel rose, leaned down, and kissed Emily in front of them all, a kiss deep, steady, and full of vow. Just then the baby kicked hard, strong enough that her dress visibly shifted at the belly. Nathaniel laughed, gently placing his hand over her stomach. "See? Even the baby's cheering." The orchestra transitioned into a softer waltz. Nathaniel began to gently turn her wheelchair in rhythm, each circle a quiet declaration. They didn't need legs. They needed each other. "You can't help but love them," Mrs. Evelyn whispered to Helena, Nathaniel's mother, who was standing in a quiet corner, tears in her eyes. Helena stood in the corner, watching as Nathaniel twirled Emily gently in her wheelchair. The smile on his face, the peace in his eyes, was something she hadn't seen in years. Her stern expression softened, lips parting as she whispered to herself, "I was wrong. She's exactly what my son always needed." The years rolled on, one blending into the next like fading colors on a canvas. The sky over New York that day was impossibly clear. Behind the Blake estate, the garden was adorned with white ribbons and lavender blooms, Emily's favorite. A soft symphony filled the air as every seat was taken. Business elites, Nathaniel's friends, former customers from Emily's candy cart, even strangers whose lives had been touched by a single truffle. Emily Carter sat in her white gown, clutching the tiny hand of her 4-year-old son, Michael. "The ring bearer for today's ceremony? Remember," she whispered, "walk slowly, okay? No falling." Michael nodded with excitement, his tiny suit perfectly matched with a lilac boutonniere, just like the flowers on her dress. As the music shifted, Clara gently pushed Emily's chair down the aisle. Then, to everyone's surprise, Emily placed her hands on the armrest and, just as she'd practiced for weeks, stood up. Her hands trembled, but her gaze never wavered. Step by step, she moved down the aisle, toward Nathaniel Blake, who waited with misty eyes. Michael walked ahead proudly, holding the ring box aloft. "For Mommy and Mr. Nate," he declared, drawing laughter from the crowd. But when Emily knelt to kiss her son's forehead, the world seemed to pause. "Thank you for walking with me," she whispered. Then, turning toward Nathaniel, she spoke. "I once believed I'd never be loved again, that I was a burden to anyone. But then you came, and you didn't just love me, you loved every part of me. My son, my past, my wounds, even the pieces I didn't yet understand." Nathaniel gently squeezed her hand. "You were never a burden," he said. "You were the gift life made me wait too long to find." They exchanged rings, and little Michael got his own special line. "Now, Mr. Nathaniel is Mommy's husband and my new dad." Laughter echoed with tears. Beneath the white archway, the three of them embraced tightly. That night, after the last toast was made, Nathaniel carried Emily into the quiet garden where fairy lights swayed over an old wooden swing. "I once thought I'd live a lonely life," he said. "Successful, but empty." "And I," she replied, leaning into him, "thought I'd live surrounded by love, but never truly loved." A small voice piped up behind them. Michael, holding his stuffed bunny, had woken and wandered into the night air. "I'm not lonely either," he said, "because I have Mommy. And Daddy now, too." Emily laughed through her tears. "Family," she said, "isn't always born. Sometimes it's built, stitch by stitch, moment by moment. And when love is the thread, it holds, even when everything else falls apart."